We have some major updates on the Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks situation. According to one NBA insider, they note that the New York Knicks are monitoring the KAT situation in Minnesota right now. But not only that, sources indicate that KAT and Tom Thibodeau have squashed their beef. But not only that, Tom Thibodeau would actually welcome coaching Karl-Anthony Towns once again. This is a major report. We're going to break it down from start to finish and get you fully updated in if the New York Knicks would trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. We'll also look into if the Timberwolves would even entertain a trade that involved Karl-Anthony Towns, whether that would be within this season or even next season. All of this and so much more today. But before we get started, guys, about 65% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed. We are so close to 4,000 subscribers. If you could, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button because it would really support all the great things that we are creating for you. And now, let's get started. The New York Knicks are currently monitoring Karl-Anthony Towns and the situation in Minnesota. Now, if you've been following me and my takes on Karl-Anthony Towns, then it's no surprise or secret. I do not want KAT on the New York Knicks team for one main reason. He gets paid like a superstar, but he doesn't perform like a superstar. And if he was traded to the Knicks, in my opinion, he would not move the needle enough to justify the assets or the contract we would be paying him. But before I get into my opinion on the situation, let's break down how we got here first. So according to Steph Bondy of the New York Post, he first indicated that the Knicks were monitoring Karl-Anthony Towns and the situation in Minnesota. So obviously when that first came out, we covered it, we did a video on it, and we made sure we broke down why it was so important that the Knicks were looking into Karl-Anthony Towns, because the connections have always been there, especially since Leon Rose took office. So that's the first thing. Then this was reported. So Stephon Bondy then reported the following. Karl-Anthony Towns said he and Tom Thibodeau squashed their beef years ago. Two men, grown men, got together and had a conversation. Then he led us on a cliffhanger and said, more to come. And he was not lying. He reported the following, and this itself almost broke Twitter alive. Shout out to one of the best basketball accounts on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it nowadays, New York Basketball. They reported that Karl-Anthony Towns stated the following. I still look at Thibs as one of the best X's and O's coaches I've ever been able to play for. He breeds winning, and I got nothing but respect for him. That doesn't sound good. That sounds like he has even more respect for him. He has even more admiration for him. And it sounds like he would welcome being coached by him again. This is something that's leading to my worst nightmare. I do not want KAT on the New York Knicks, but I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to give my comments yet because, guys, I'm not done yet. It gets even worse because it continues further. Stephon Bondy reported with the New York Post that Tom Thibodeau said the following about Karl-Anthony Towns and the type of player that he is. When you look at an offensive player, particularly a big, the skill set he has, I think we all saw to win the three-point contest and stuff like that. There's nothing he can't do offensively. He has continued to get better, I think. He had some injuries to deal with. I watched him play in FIBA, the World Cup. He played really well there. He's really, really gifted. And Steph Bondy noted after Tom Thibodeau mentioned that even though they seem like a poor fit in Minnesota, multiple sources stated that Tom Thibodeau would welcome coaching Towns again. Multiple sources indicated that Tom Thibodeau would welcome coaching Karl-Anthony Towns again. So their beef is gone. Tom Thibodeau would welcome coaching him again. And Karl-Anthony Towns stated that in terms of coaches, Thibs was his best X's and O's coach that he's had. And I wish I could say it was done. This continues even further. it's still not done. Per Steph Bondy, Tom Thibodeau continued and stated the following. Watching the progress he's made throughout his career, he's as gifted as they come. And then Bondy dropped this. It's relevant that Tom Thibodeau is stating this about Towns because if Towns hits the trade market, the Knicks, according to sources, are monitoring his situation. We knew that a couple of days ago, but then Bondy doubles down on it again in another article. And my heart stops nearly because the one player I don't want to have on this New York Knicks team because of contract, but not only that, because I don't believe he's going to move the needle enough to justify the contract or the assets you're going to have to give up to trade for him. For me, it would be one of the worst trades the New York Knicks can do. I'm not saying he's not good. I'm not saying he's not great. I'm not saying he's not talented. But Karl-Anthony Towns is a great three-point shooter. That's probably the best thing I can say about him. In terms of his defense, meh. His perimeter game, meh. His inside game, not so much. He can run the floor very well depending on who's in front of him. But if he has a good big in front of him or a decent big that can give him trouble, he's going to run and stop. And he doesn't have the mid-range game like that to stop and pop off the dribble. So he can't hurt defenses in that regard. And given his age and how long he's been in the league, I don't see him adding that to his bag. That could be wrong. I just don't see that happening. And if you trade for Towns, I don't think he's even a number 1 on a championship team. He might be, at best, a number 2 on a championship team. And if you're paying somebody nearly $50 million a year, and you're bringing him in and trading significant assets for him, and he's not a number 1. In my opinion, you don't give up significant assets for a player like that. But what really scares me, guys, is the clip you're watching right now. As you can see, there's Gerson Rosas right there. You got Leon Rose, and they call over Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't know what the conversation was. I don't know if they were just catching up. I don't know if it was just a couple of laughs. But here's what I do know. I didn't like it. What is that? What is that? Why are they doing that? Why did they meet like that? You see everything I just pointed to. Oh yeah, and by the way, after that, this was pointed out on video as well too. Roll this little small clip. You see this? Julius Randle, Karl-Anthony Towns, Kentucky boys, they have that connection. And Julius Randle's likely not going to be the one who's traded in any deal. So if that's the case, that might be the front court that you might see at some point. You got Gerson Rosas and Leon Rose talking and calling over Karl-Anthony Towns. And then you got Julius Randle and Karl-Anthony Towns having some fun, playing around with each other right before the game starts, probably having a little bit of conversation here and there. I don't like it. I don't like what I am seeing because all of these things together, as you can see, I put them all together very nicely for you so you can see what I see and be just as caught up as I am. Do you see? I don't like it. I'm not saying Karl-Anthony Towns is traded before the season, but Steph Bondy himself already reported that the most feasible in-season trade would be for Karl-Anthony Towns. It does not make sense. But let's go down this rabbit hole. Would the Timberwolves trade Karl-Anthony Towns anyways? Would they even entertain a trade? Well, you know what? Here's the funny part about it. If you remember back in July, Mark Stein actually wrote an article about KAT and the fact that he holds the most value right now with the Timberwolves. Mark Stein, an NBA insider, wrote this in July about Karl-Anthony Towns with the situation in Minnesota. Towns is considered Minnesota's most expendable asset, with Rudy Gobert on a massive contract and Anthony Edwards being the face of the franchise, both now and in the future. According to NBA insider Mark Stein, the belief is Towns holds more trade value than Gobert. Towns is also generally regarded league-wide as the far more tradable of the two, given he's the younger of the 7-footers, 27, to Gobert's 31, and his long-distance shooting. Shout out to Mark Stein for telling us back in July that Karl-Anthony Towns holds the most trade value right now for the Timberwolves. So if you're asking me, would the Wolves trade Karl-Anthony Towns? Well, I think it depends. Would they trade him now? No, there's no reason to. If they start out slow, they don't do what they need to do. They don't contend in the West like they hope to, because everybody thinks that the Timberwolves are a team to watch and they can take that next step this year with everybody coming back with another year underneath them, Towns being healthy again, and hopefully giving them a full season of greatness. I think you can say with some certainty that the team right now, Minnesota Timberwolves, it's Ant Edwards' team. That's no doubt about it. But he still shares the spotlight just a little bit with Karl-Anthony Towns. If Towns was out, it would solely be the Ant-Man show, and it would be the spotlight on him, and maybe he would thrive even more. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying that if we're talking about the reports, we're talking about what's feasible, we're reading the tea leaves here, and we're looking at everything that's been reported. Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks is number 1, feasible. Number 2, the connections are there. Number 3, it makes sense. And number 4, which is the most scary, the Knicks actually have all of the assets and more to get a deal done either before the season or, in my opinion, which might be the most likely, if the Wolves spiral out of control, they could make a mid-season trade to acquire Towns, especially if they feel Embiid is off the table. And I think that's really the only way the Knicks would go after Karl-Anthony Towns, is if they had confidence that that is the only person left on the table and Embiid is completely off and he's either going to stay with the Philadelphia 76ers or he's going to go to another team. But if the Knicks have confidence in that, that's the only way I can see them going after KAT. Other than that, I really don't see them making a move for him. That's just my opinion. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the New York Knicks have the most realistic shot to add KAT to their roster, either before the season starts or during the season, or maybe even next season? Let me know in the comments below, because honestly, guys, I would love to hear from you. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, smash that like button, leave a comment below, but of course, guys, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Knicks fans. Peace.